Hello and welcome back to another episode of Warming the Bench. It's Bev and Daniela here. Bev, how are you today?
Well, I was going to mention the weather, but I'm not going to because just about everybody mentions the weather. I don't know, it's a national obsession in this country. So I'm just going to say I'm fine. And how is everybody else? I hope you're well. How about you, Dan?
I, I'm absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for asking. And you know, I'm going to be the person who mentions the weather because we're having a phenomenal summer so far, and I'm very excited about it. I think I've
Oh.
turned into. I heard that the English are very obsessed with the weather, and I think you guys are, and I'm turning into one of you, I think.
There you go.
Oh my goodness. Hilarious, hilarious. Anyways, everyone, we really hope you are also enjoying your summer or wherever you might be located. We have a really exciting episode for you today. We mentioned the topic last week, and we're going to get into that later. But as you know, we usually like to kick off our podcast with a little bit of recap, what's been going on. And I had a specific request to speak a little bit about this side of the pond, as Bev likes to say, or as the cliche phrase likes to put it, because we haven't touched too much on the NWSL and the NSL. Very confusing to get the two kind of separated, but they are two separate leagues for anybody who's not aware. And Bev, I just wanted to ask, as someone who's living in another country or continent as well, what do you have any sort of is there any sort of perception of the NWSL? I know the NSL is a little bit newer, so a little less, but is there any perception maybe in England? Is it talked about as a lot? Like, give us a kind of what your perception is over there.
I find myself, talking for myself, a little bit insular, a little
Mhm,
bit parochial in terms of
mhm,
that. My interest, first and foremost, is the WSL and WSL2.
mhm,
And I would like,
mhm,
perhaps in the future, I would like there to be a bridge between this side of the
mm,
pond and your side of the pond. I'd like to know more about the NWSL and NSL, because I think
mhm,
there are lots, occasionally there are snippets that come through, like Trinity Rodman
mhm.
and her breaking through the ceiling in terms of salary, lots of different things. And I think, oh, yeah, I'd like to know that. But I understand that the TV rights have been awarded to CBS and another. So for the
Yes.
WSL, but I would like to have
Mhm.
something for the NWSL as well to learn more about
Yeah.
the league.
Oh, completely. I agree with you, and I think I actually have an interesting theory here that it's probably going to get a little bit more connected because there are quite a few people from English footballers who are making the move over to the NWSL
Yes.
specifically. Esme Morgan currently plays in the league. Jess Carter is over in the NWSL. Um, Anouk Denton plays in San Francisco, I believe it is. And there's a couple of up and coming youngsters that seem to have links and that might be popping over. So I think maybe as some of those footballers start to move over, you're going to see a little bit more connection and perhaps you'll have more of a access to it as well. Because right now, as we've mentioned a million times, access is very all over the place for so many things.
Absolutely. Am I right in thinking that Lexi Lloyd Smith is going over?
I'm not sure. I had heard Erica Parkinson actually is going over, so she's the youngster that was recently called into the
Yeah.
Lionesses camp. The last one, not this current one. And there's also one youngster from Arsenal. I believe her name is Lila Herbert. Harbert.
Mm.
She's has a strong link to be going over as well. And Kira Berry, who used to play for Manchester United, has also made the move over. So
Yeah.
quite a few youngsters have been pursued by these teams. But Lex is probably one to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would like to know about them because they're
Definitely.
very young and they can feed, eventually, I hope,
Mhm,
feed through into the England
mhm.
national team. Hopefully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, in that regard, let's talk a little bit about the NWSL. So, for those who might not be aware, the NWSL operates completely different than European leagues because it is a closed league. Okay, so there's no automatic promotion or relegation because that structure just does not exist currently. So it's a closed league. They have two big trophies that they compete for. The first one is essentially the same as winning the league. So if you finish top, you win the league. And then there's a championship, which is another trophy you can win, and it's via like a playoff system. So you get into the playoffs, it's one knockout game, you keep going, you get the big trophy at the end. So right now, I think the biggest story in the NWSL is that a former WSL manager, Jonas Eidevall, currently has his team sitting in the top spot. So the San Diego Wave right now are sitting at the top of the table, and they look pretty good. And they had a little bit of a turbulent kind of lead into this season. They had former manager Casey Stoney was fired rather brutally out of nowhere about a year and a half back. They had a little bit of a rough go towards the back end of last season. But they started really well with Jonas Eidevall, and he's continuing to bring this team forward. And they recently signed Katerina Macario. Of course, she's been injured, so unfortunately has not featured yet. But the other massive story, and this is something I don't think we see very often in the WSL, Bev, is that a team that finished nearly dead last previous season is currently sitting right behind the San Diego Wave, 1 point off the top, which is marvelous when you think about it, because we probably cannot envision a world in which West Ham finishes bottom of the table this year and next year is in top spot. Am I right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. How
Yeah.
did they achieve that? That is absolutely amazing. Is it because of the structure of the league? Because it is a closed
I
league?
believe so, yes. Yeah, I believe so. There's also a little bit more parity across the league. So, because the NWSL operates with a salary cap, of course, that has been amended a little bit now because they do have certain rules to be able to bring in players and pay them a higher salary, a la Trinity Rodman, Katerina Macario, for example. So
Mm.
they do have those options. But typically, across all of the teams, they are a lot more balanced. So you will not have a bunch of stars on one team, maybe barring the Washington Spirit where Trinity Rodman plays. There is a little bit more talent there, but again, they're not sitting in top spot right now. So it just kind of shows what that parity looks like. So I think that's part of it. And then just strategic moves. This Utah Royals, this is the team that's sitting just 1 point off the top, and they finished again towards the bottom of the table last year. You know, they acquired a couple of new players. They got a couple players back from injury. So just sort of things like that, because of that parity, allows them, I think, to be making the charge that they're making currently right now. So it's definitely one to pay attention to. It's very fascinating, I will say that.
Well, you did ask me what was my preference in terms of an NWSL league or the WSL. Now, the more I'm listening to you, the more I'm beginning to become attracted to the NWSL. I think it sounds very exciting because
Mhm.
of the parity and
It
because it's
is.
closed and because you say that, you know, you talked about one
Mhm.
club being at the bottom, but now is it the at the heels of, you know, the top
Mhm.
spot. Now, I find that exciting,
Mhm.
and there is
It is.
independence each of the clubs. I think that
Mhm.
I think
Correct.
perhaps maybe the NWSL might have a think. Considering we've now got Cannes and also Birmingham, obviously they've got a degree of
Mhm.
independence, haven't they, with their own investments?
Certainly. No, for sure. It is very exciting. I will say, from a watcher's standpoint, I think it's a lot more of a transitional league. However, it is the style of play is more transitional. It is definitely starting to take a little bit more of that technical side, but I definitely see a little bit of a difference when I watch, for example, the WSL versus the NWSL. So that's probably something that if you are a fan more of European football and a little bit more technical, you might not necessarily struggle to watch the NWSL because it is very exciting and can be very, very fun to watch. But it's probably something you will notice a little bit. And when I mean a little bit, it's fine margins of difference in quality. It's not as
Mm.
much as it used to be for sure. That's probably one of the biggest, if you want to say criticisms, I'm not even sure if that's the correct word, but that I definitely hear from people. But it definitely is getting better because they do have a lot more European managers as well into the league. So they are starting to change that, and some of their players are starting to develop a lot more of that technical side. And because they are bringing in players from overseas as well, so you kind of get different layers of players that are involved there also.
Would you say players like,
And yeah,
sorry, would you say
no, no,
players like
no, no, go for it.
Trinity Rodman, is it
Mhm.
her her worth, or sorry, I don't want to use that word. I don't want to denounce her in some way, but the value of her
I know.
is reflective of that
Mhm.
particular league. So if she came over to the WSL, there might be a difference.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? It's a relative thing in terms of,
Yes.
yeah, the star, the
Mhm.
standard, etc. of her play. I don't want that to sound as though I'm derogatory in any
No.
way.
No, 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 you're absolutely right because there, aside from when she signed her contract, there was quite a bit of a conversation around whether she would leave the NWSL. And I think
Mm,
they are a little bit linked. And I think what a lot of maybe how I can explain this, and if we have any American listeners, I know we do, you can definitely weigh in once we publish our episode, but it is also very connected to their national team. So something in this part of the world, we are very much, we take massive pride in our national teams because for a long time, the domestic leagues or the domestic development wasn't as high. So I know in Europe, you'll find more of a club over country type of mentality.
uh,
Here, it's
yeah,
very much aligned more so to the national team. So, because Trinity represents this huge figure on their national team, it would have been a massive loss for them because she is such a great player. I think she could develop a lot more, and she probably could develop a lot more outside of the NWSL, but she is very, very good. And because you see her on the national stage as well, that's kind of representative of okay, well, if you come to the NWSL, you have figures like Rodman in this league, for example. Not just her, there's other ones, of course. But
yeah,
because it was a big story and so forth, she does add so much. And because there is that massive connection to the national team, they're kind of linked together, if I explain
yeah,
that correctly, hopefully. Again, our
yeah,
American listeners, you can definitely weigh in if I got that correct, but that's kind of how I've seen it. Um, so yeah, it is very fascinating, but it is a very fun league to watch. So if anybody's not tuned into the NWSL, you can also tune in on NWSL Plus for free. You just need to register an account. They usually have games there. They have the replays, so definitely check it out. One story from the NWSL I do want to shout out, Bev, is that there was two expansion teams. So two new teams came into the league this year. One of them, the Denver Summit, which is currently being coached by Nick Cushing, is doing really well. They're actually sitting 2 points off the playoff cutoff line. So they're doing fairly well for an expansion team, which again is pretty good. If you figure, in the WSL, for example, teams that come in from promotion, do they usually do that well and that kind of thing? That's probably the best example. And so Denver is definitely one to look out for as this, we're currently in a break right now for the Men's World Cup. Coming back from the World Cup, I would say anybody who's paying attention to the NWSL, keep paying attention to Denver and definitely see if Utah can keep that second spot right behind San Diego Wave because it's getting pretty spicy at the top of that table.
mm,
And yeah, very, very spicy. And now we're going to move over to the northernmost part of North America here, my good old country of Canada that I'm currently sitting in with our beautiful weather. And I wanted to tell everybody about this because we haven't spoken too much about the Northern Super League. And I know, Bev, you had questions or you had some interest as well. And so the NSL, for anyone who is not familiar, launched only last year in 2025. So up until last year, Canada was the only country in the FIFA top 10 ranked nations that did not have a professional league, which is quite interesting. And we'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about federations. We only have six teams, so they play each other quite frequently. Now, Bev, if you recall, last year in the WSL, Man City and Chelsea played each other like 4 times in a row,
mm,
which was quite a fun tactical battle. So you figure with only six teams in this league, they play each other a lot. So it can get boring, but it can also get really interesting because what happens when you have to play a team constantly? You have to continuously evolve your tactics.
yes.
So the NSL is quite interesting in that regard. So we have teams in Toronto, we have teams in the nation's capital of Ottawa, Montreal, Halifax, Calgary, and Vancouver. Our league was co-founded by Diana Matheson. She used to be a member of our national team. Anyone who is Canadian will know who Diana Matheson is. She's quite literally the hero of domestic progression here in terms of the game. We love her. And right now, Montreal and Ottawa have emerged as the front runners for the league. They're sitting in the first and second spot. And Bev, let me tell you, there's been no game that has been absolutely boring this season. Even with playing each other so often, it is so fun to watch. And I really hope that we can get some more viewers on the NSL. It is available to watch on YouTube as well for those who do not have access on television. I believe it's also available for you to watch, Bev, but I will send you the link after and you can let me know if that's the case. But from your side of it, what do you think about a country? If you think of England, for example, you've had the WSL for so long, and that has reflected well on your national team success. What do you think about the fact that in 2025, a country over here did not have a domestic league? What's your thoughts on that?
Are you joking?
I'm
I mean,
joking.
it's, I mean, I mean,
Yeah.
we've done a podcast on structures, and we're about to do
Hmm.
one on the FA, aren't we? Not FA, but
Hmm.
uh, feder football
Associations.
associations of various different countries that we've individually chosen. And you can see a clear
Hmm.
structure there from grassroots up to youth
Hmm.
division and academies that feed eventually through to the national side.
Hmm.
So I, all things considered, and I'm thinking about Rose, and Olivia Smith, who
Hmm.
are absolutely fantastic players, that they ever got
Hmm.
captured to go into the national team. There seems to me gaps, gaping gaps. But how was that achieved?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because, Jade was in university, so we have looked at our university players. Are they playing in university? Olivia Smith, kind of similar, and then she went over professionally to Europe. Some players have drifted into the NWSL, or they've always played overseas. So realistically, if we look back to 2021 when we did win a gold medal at the Olympics, not having a domestic league was quite a good achievement considering the national teams in most countries really do not progress well without any sort of domestic development on that level. So in terms of getting that that domestic league going, it was definitely late, and I think we are starting to see the downfall of that lateness. But it is finally here, and it is fun. It is very fun to watch. Um, it has also been developed at a time where you could listen to an interview with Diana Matheson, and it's very clear that they looked at a whole bunch of different leagues around the world and picked what they liked the best out of all of them in terms of salaries, in terms of benefits, how it's going to operate, that sort of thing. So that was probably a pro of it because you could look at maybe what has worked in other places and what hasn't worked, and they were able to do that. And we're starting to see the benefits of that now too. Attendances have been higher than expected, which is really good considering it's only in its second year, sorry, of the league.
Right.
Yeah, and there's some veterans that are playing in the league. So Quinn, one of our players, is here. Desiree Scott was recently here as well. She just retired, but there is quite a bit of focus on it, and I know that there's expansion coming next year, so there's going to be more teams coming in, and there definitely is a market, absolute big market for women's football or women's soccer, as we would call it here. So definitely one to keep an eye on. Again, guys, NWSL can be watched on the NWSL Plus if you do not have access to it on cable television. NSL can also be watched on YouTube. And that's it for this side of the pond, Bev. Let's go over to your side because World Cup qualifiers for UEFA were happening. Just a little thing. I think I might have seen a few little headlines going floating around.
Only just a few little headlines. Wow, right. Okay, let's be
Just a
measured in this.
few.
Dan, as
Yes.
yes, just a few thousand. Dan, as somebody that is not English, can you start,
Hmm.
please? I'd like your perspective. Can you start and then I'll add mine?
Absolutely. I actually was able to watch the Spain and England game on Friday, I believe it was.
Yep.
And it was nicely streamed on YouTube. Thank you for those who streamed it. And okay, so I will say that England, for anyone who did not watch, and you've maybe lived under a rock, England lost 4-0 to Spain. Now, I think the result in itself, as a neutral, if you isolate it, okay, you lost to Spain. Someone is going to always lose to Spain. It's going to happen probably to almost every team that they will face at some point or another. If you take that game out of isolation and you look at Spain and England's record against each other, there has not been a result like this. It's always been a pretty fair result, and it's always been kind of a back and forth result. So Spain will get one win, England will get another. It's almost like they're trading wins back and forth, basically. Now, this one, when I watched it, it was a poor performance from the Lionesses. I don't think anyone would say otherwise. They have even said it was not a great performance from them. I think the panic of it has been um, a little dramatic, to say the least. I believe the game highlighted some holes that maybe need to be filled or that need to be addressed. But again, in isolation, but even taking it out of isolation, I don't believe the result is as terrible as it's being made to be from the headlines and from the outrage that seems to be taking place with this game, because it is still very possible that they're going to the World Cup. It's not like they're not qualifying or whatever it might be. It might just be a couple of extra games before you get there, which of course is not necessarily ideal, but the sky is not necessarily falling either. That's kind of my perspective on the game. How did you feel about it?
Well, let me put it this way. I really thought about this because obviously I'm
Hmm.
English. You need to stand back and
Hmm.
get some perspective. So I thought about this. I
Yes.
mean, even before the game had finished, it was out on social media. What a load of shite. And the first time I've been
Hmm.
watching the Lionesses, I've turned the television off, and this kind of,
Hmm.
this kind of stuff. And I thought, but actually, there were very few that at that point, when I say stand up for the Lionesses, I don't quite mean it, but there weren't the real supporters of the Lionesses, but also could be critical of them, but also could keep it on an even keel. There weren't many supporters like
Hmm.
that coming forward and say, hang on a minute. They came out 2 or 3 days later, and I guess they were measured in their approach and what they had to say. But going back to the
Right.
game and the coaches, so I think of Alex Ferguson, Pep Guardiola,
Hmm.
Emma Hayes,
Hmm.
and Serena. Now, there's probably more out there, but I'm just thinking about those four managers and coaches. Now, those four
Hmm.
managers, what they have in common, or was, is consistency. Now, consistency in what any sport is full of variables and is very fluid, dynamic, and complicated. Because if you factor in every country in the world and team in the world, you can see that in itself is very complicated and variables that bring, or get added to the mix. So if you have four consistent managers, one of which is Serena, they are outstanding in their field. What would you say to that, Dan?
Hmm. Oh, completely. Completely. And like you said, there's a level of consistency there. And consistency, by the way, does not mean they always win. That's not what we
No,
mean by any
no.
stretch. It is that they, sometimes will suffer some brutal defeats. That's just a reality of the game that we watch.
Mm,
You're not always going to win, but what you can do at a level, if you looked at any of those managers, if you could kind of compare them and you looked at their win, loss, and draw rate, you're probably going to see a solid 75% overall consistency
yeah.
level towards them. And that speaks to their overall ability versus in isolated situations like this game, for example.
Absolutely. And then thinking about Serena in particular, I thought, well, look at this. She's won 3 Euros back to back with two countries, the
Mm.
Netherlands and England.
Hmm.
And then she's also got to World Cup finals as well. Now, you don't achieve that through being rubbish. You are very good at what you
Correct.
do. You have to have, I
Hmm.
suppose, a football intelligence, very much like an emotional intelligence, etc. Perhaps you would combine those two, to be
Yes.
honest with you, because you have to manage a team and
Hmm.
you have to manage individuals within a team. And it's,
Hmm.
oh, get rid of her. There was a big sway of, oh, get rid of her, she needs to go. But you won't find many people like Emma Hayes and Pep Guardiola. You won't find many. They don't come round very often. So it's best to stick with Serena.
Correct.
um,
It's
I
true. It's true.
I did. It was a bad game. It in terms of the
Yeah.
Lionesses, you can't let them off that. It was a bad game. And if you say,
No.
"Oh, it was the Lionesses," they'll come back on Tuesday. They probably will, but they may not,
Hmm.
because there is always a
Right.
there is always a
That's true.
question mark.
Yeah.
But looking at Serena's record, you're likely to say they will. Okay. And because it's also
Hmm.
against Iceland.
Yeah.
However, Iceland shouldn't be undervalued. They shouldn't be, you know what I mean? And they shouldn't be underrated because they put up a great defence against England last time in their own country. Um,
Hmm.
they were abysmal. I mean, they were outplayed in
Yeah.
midfield. They were absolutely
Oh my
swarmed
gosh.
on in midfield. And I was watching at one point, I was watching Russo, and she just couldn't get on the ball. But then neither did the Lionesses get in there and tackle. There was no creativity. Everything was smothered. You would look to Lawrence James,
Yeah.
she was smothered. You would look to Georgia Stanway. She is great from scoring goals from about 20, 30 yards out, but she was smothered. Everybody was. The only one I would say that tried to penetrate was Lauren Hemp. She
Mhm.
tried a few times, but even her, um, Lucy Bronze came a cropper and she made quite a lot of mistakes, in my opinion. But I'm not going to have a pile
Yes.
on and pick out individuals because actually it was a team effort and they all made a balls up.
Mhm.
To be quite frank with you,
I,
um,
Mhm.
I
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. When I was watching it, it was one of those games where, okay, I actually thought the first 10 minutes, it wasn't bad. Like they started pretty well.
yes,
And then I saw Spain almost like they got into their rhythm very quickly. And that's kind of scary because, as we've mentioned, Spain are
yeah,
very similar to Barcelona because, let's be honest, the majority of the Spain team is Barcelona.
yeah,
If you can disrupt them for a long time, it's the better option. But the
mm,
minute they start getting into that rhythm, it's like they smell blood. And then
yeah,
you don't know how to stop the bleeding basically because they look like they were in the mood, and I think you always knew that they were probably going to come out strong as well, Spain, because they're also on home soil. It's a little bit of a different atmosphere. So you always got the sense that whatever happened a couple months ago at Wembley was probably not going to be the same result, not going to be the same performance on both ends of it. The funny thing, and kind of funny, is that I don't even think Spain played particularly well. It's just unfortunately the Lionesses were even worse, and it
absolutely.
showed again,
Mm,
as you said, from back to front. I mean, Lauren James was like playing a makeshift left back at one point. I'm like, what's going on
mm,
here? Like, why is she all the way back there constantly tracking back? I
mm,
mean, her defensive work is good these days, but ideally you want her up the pitch to try to make an
yeah,
impact, right?
yeah,
And I think what you said about Russo, this is one where Serena Wiegman for me, this is one where I think she got a little bit wrong in terms of the
mm,
tactics as well. I mean, the team didn't help her, but I think tactically they need or England needs, and this is some of the criticism, and again, some of those holes were showing and probably ones that should be addressed. This game showed probably needed a very direct striker.
yes,
And that's not a knock to Russo. I think she's fantastic, but she's not the one who's going to go direct. She's not a Bunny Shaw or a Sam Kerr or so
no,
forth. It's like a poacher in the box. And I think
yeah.
England needed a poaching striker for this game because Spain is vulnerable when you put them under direct pressure. But if you can't put them under direct pressure, they're just going to play right through you. And that was pretty evident in this game.
Bunny Shaw is greedy and she is
Hmm.
selfish when she
Yes.
needs to be, but
Yes.
that gets the
Correct.
goal over the line and the game's won. And Russo, I don't think quite
Correct.
has that edge. I agree with what you're saying, Dan. But also, I think there were some players, I'm not going to name them, it doesn't need it, but there were some
Hmm.
players who were not fit. Again, we've spoken about this,
No.
Dan. There is a difference between
Fitness.
medical fitness and game fitness, and they weren't there for me.
Hmm.
That credit in the
Yep.
bank, as Serena said, well, sometimes I think that needs to be looked at. I think the team does need to be
Agreed.
evolved. I think the team needs to be
Hmm.
evolved. When they know they've got quite a high percentage of winning, I think those younger players need to come in. Or else, why do you have an
Hmm.
academy? Why do you have the
Yeah.
structure that England has? Do you know what I mean then? Why?
Hmm.
Why?
Agreed.
Because you
Yeah.
only need to look at Michelle Angerman to see that in the Euros. And she's never, hardly, seldom played apart from against Belgium when she came straight out within 45 seconds. She got that goal against Belgium, didn't she? But, you know,
Yeah.
she came into the Sweden and the Italy game and she won, she got those goals. Now, there is always somebody out
Mhm.
there waiting to be found. They are hungry. They're fearless. They're not programmed to be fearful.
Mhm.
because they don't
No,
have that match experience, if you like. They just go out there and do it. They're, do you know what I mean? In they're not tarnished in any way, if you want, if for want of a
no.
better word.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think evolution is one of them.
Mm.
Again, and I know you don't want to name drop. I'll be the person, and it's not to pile on. It was a horrible performance across the board. Okay, so there's no one to blame for this. From goalkeeper to striker, everyone had a stinky game. Let's just put that out there.
Mm.
But I think in terms of, I do like Lucy. I don't think going into a World Cup next year with Lucy Bronze as the sole right back option is a very smart decision.
No.
She might not make it to the World Cup. She's been struggling with on and off with injury the last year, so you never know what that's going to look like, right? So I think
Mm.
when you talk about evolution, it's like how are you going to evolve certain positions and certain things to have options? And it's not even so much of having options, it's do you trust those people to do the job? And if
Yes.
you can't trust them, then that speaks more to perhaps how you're evolving the squad or the lack of evolution in the squad because you can have a
Mm.
preferred starting 11. That's great. I think every team has that. But if those players are not available, the other ones on the bench or the other ones in the fold need to know
Mm.
that, oh, my coaching staff trusts me to do this, and I feel confident in doing that. Because if they're not trusted and they're put out there, it's going to show 100%.
I totally agree with you. I mean, it's the Maya Letitia question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
In
Yep,
terms of replacing Lucy
absolutely. She's,
Bronze. You know, and she is the
hmm
captain for Man
yeah,
U, and she's played every single game, and she is fantastic. I think she is.
hmm
And to be quite honest
yeah,
with you, again, I don't want to pile on, but I did notice a lot of mistakes being made by Lucy, and also at times she was hobbling.
hmm
She just didn't look fit. And for me,
yeah,
this we're talking about the World Cup. It's a very brutal game,
hmm
it's football. And I do feel that
yes,
sentiment
hmm
needs to be taken out of it because, you know, you look at supporters and what they're saying, oh, get rid of the blah, 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 blah. To a certain degree, there's something in what they say. There's a brutal truth in there, if you want to be
hmm
honest about it. If you take the sentiment
yep,
out, you need your best team
hmm
going forward to Brazil in 2027. And I don't see that
correct.
Lucy is necessarily the best now. I think she's in decline. And I don't want that to sound
hmm
horrible because she's
No,
been fantastic for her country, but she can't keep going, and
completely.
neither can any of the other players. What are your thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I love Lucy. I think she's probably, if 10 years from now, when you look at some of the best players England's ever produced, I think there's an argument to be made. Lucy Bronze is absolutely making that list without a question. Absolutely no question about it. I think she's been fantastic for club, for country. No matter what club she's played for, she's always been great. And she's played for some of the best clubs in the world, right?
Mm.
But she is getting a little bit older, and unfortunately, we do have to admit that age does slow you down a little bit. And as much as I think her mentality and her leadership is absolutely welcome because she definitely has that attitude and that
Yeah.
mentality, it's not it's not feasible for her to continue to go at the rate that she does for club and for country. And her coaches on both levels, and Sonia, I'm looking at you, need to understand that there are limitations to her now. And I
Mm.
think that she should be a player who is a luxury that you have in your
Yes.
squad, not one that you run into the ground, because she is a luxury. I mean, to be able to say I can bring Lucy Bronze off the bench is hello, like let's be serious. Most people would say yes to that. But those sorts of holes, I also think, again, when we're talking about strikers, I don't know if this would have made a difference, but I also think not having, like I said, a direct striker. Aggie was left off the squad. I don't know if that was a fitness issue. Serena said it was a selection decision. Again, not saying she
Mm.
would have done anything differently, but it's a direct option. She's a lot more of a direct striker. She's a little bit of a
Yes.
poacher. She
Yeah.
maybe could have tried to influence something. You never know. Again, who knows? It's, hindsight now, but just having those types of individuals. Ella Toon looked a little bit off the mark. And again,
Mm.
just coming back from injury, perhaps wasn't
Mm.
the best decision to start her off the bat. Just small things like that. And as you were saying, maybe there are certain people that need to evolve, and that credit in the bank or whatever it might be needs to just kind of left to the side right now.
Yes, I agree. I mean, the Lucy Bronze when she started and the game as it was is quite different
Hmm
because it's constantly evolving. It's very fast paced in the WSL. I mean, questions have been asked about
Absolutely.
Taylor. Will she be able to keep up in terms of the speed of the
hmm
WSL? You know, the game at that speed.
Yeah.
So it's a very different game from when Lucy
Hmm.
started, and
For
I
sure.
understand why she wants to hang on, or it was not her hanging on. If she's selected, that's up to the coach, but I understand why she wants to continue for as long as she can. I'm sure all players would, but
Hmm.
it's about your country and your country winning the biggest tournament in on the planet.
Hmm.
Go with your best team.
For sure. For sure. For sure. So watch this space, everyone, because I'm sure we will have more to chat about as qualifiers. They're going to wrap up this week for Europe. Before we dive into our topic, and again, guys, it's going to be a little bit of a longer episode because we like to yap a lot. Um, is I just want to give a shout out to the Republic of Ireland.
Oh
They
gosh.
are 10 out of their last 14 games won under Carla Ward. They had a cracking game against the Netherlands on Friday as well. I was able to watch that one. What a game. The fight, the passion, the no give up mentality from that team is something to be admired, and they have an absolute shot at putting a dagger into these qualifying rounds and directly qualifying tomorrow. Um, if they are able to get a result or a win, sorry, against France. And honestly, they've beaten France before. I could see it happening, Bev. This might be a big upset coming down for the French team. What do you think?
I, Again, I'm limited in terms of what I can access, and it is a country thing.
Hmm.
However, I did see about 13 minutes highlights of the game, and it's exactly as you describe. It's that fight, it's that passion, doggedness,
Yeah.
sticking in there. And
Hmm.
again, what you were talking about with, those strikers that go the extra yard, they're selfish, they poach, they're creative, they get in there and they score. Yeah, I saw that from the
Yeah.
Republic of Ireland, especially the last goal.
Yes.
Straight in, yeah, God
Hmm.
almighty. And it was quite well
Yeah.
attended, Dan. It was quite well, the passion coming from the fans as well.
Oh, crazy. The stadium, I think it was, I don't know, 14,000 or whatever it was in the pouring rain. My goodness, it did not look like fun temperature or fun situations to be in rain-wise, but that stadium sounded loud and those fans were absolutely given the best atmosphere. It was such a joy to watch. Highly recommend everyone to go try and watch that game replay on YouTube because it was really, really fun. But speaking of the Republic of Ireland, they have the FIA, which is a federation, and I think we should maybe dive into our topic today, which is federations. Maybe not the best segue, but I tried.
Ah, okay then. All right. Do you
Yes.
want me to
Kick us
start?
off, Bev.
Yeah, I'm always ready.
Absolutely. You go for it.
Right then. Okay. Please, can you chip in here? Because in terms of structures and FA, etc., I don't quite have your wealth of experience. So I need to kind of pull on yours from time to time, if you don't mind. Okay.
Sure.
Um, Now, the countries I chose here,
Hmm.
I chose them for the federation. So very much what we're talking really is football association.
Hmm.
So the English FA. So if I can put that into some
Yeah.
kind of what the structure looks like very briefly and very simply, you have FIFA. That's the supreme
Hmm.
governing body, isn't it? And that was
Yes.
founded in 1904. Now I say 1904 because constantly we have the women's game steeped in tradition. And when it's steeped in tradition, sometimes that can be great, but also it can be
Mhm.
stifling if you want to move forward and
Yes.
create the women's game stand in its own light, if you like. So that in
Hmm.
itself I needed to mention. And then you have
Yes.
various continental confederations. So you have UEFA. There are six of them. I'll name a few of them. So you have UEFA, which is Europe, CONCACAF, which is
Mhm.
North America,
Yep.
Central America,
Hmm.
and then you have the
Correct.
Caribbean,
Yep.
which is CONMEBOL, yes. And I
Hmm.
didn't put the other three, but I just wanted to quickly mention, give a pen picture that there are six of them. And then you have the
Hmm.
football associations. I just mentioned one, and that was England's football association. Japan is the country that I've chosen. So Japan
Okay.
also is known as the Football Association. Now, the countries I chose, I wanted to get away from your Englands and your USAs and your Spains because they're under the microscope quite a lot. And I wanted
Yes.
just to, widen the scope and widen the conversation to give a little bit of a pen picture of what's going on within other countries. Now, I don't know about
Yes.
you. I don't know about you, Dan, but in
Hmm.
kind of defining the Football Association, it's about FIFA is the global unity of football. But I would say that the
Hmm.
football associations are about individual country identity
Yes.
and
Yep.
and the diverse, the actual country identity and the diversity of the particular countries in mind. Yeah. And
Yeah, that sounds right.
and the cultural aspect of those individual countries as well, when you look at their individual football associations. So
Hmm.
if I can give a little bit of a thumbnail of
Hmm.
Japan's women's history, they are called,
Hmm.
I hope I get this right, Nadeshiko, or how could you pronounce that,
Hmm.
Dan? Nadeshiko, Japan?
Na
Nadeshiko,
Yeah,
Japan.
Nadeshiko, yeah,
Yeah,
something along those lines. That sounds about right.
yeah. So the actual
Yep, we
meaning
tried.
of yeah, the actual meaning of that is dianthus, and a dianthus is a flower, and that flower
Yes.
looks a little bit like a carnation. So what it's trying to
Hmm.
encapsulate is the femininity, if you like, of the woman, but
Yes.
also the strength
Hmm.
of the woman. So you could say like a steel magnolia. There is a film out called Steel
Hmm.
Magnolia, but I'm thinking of that fusion.
Yes.
There is strength there.
Hmm.
There is empowerment of the woman, but also the femininity, the softness of the woman, and keeping those two
Hmm.
entities balanced, if you like. Um, they
Yeah.
are quite a successful team, but like all women's teams and all countries of women's teams, it's been quite a fluctuating picture. So at times they
Hmm.
have been extremely successful, and at other times they've gone down in decline. And usually you find it's at the expense, the women's game is at the expense of the men's team. And
Yeah.
if any time the country is, particularly Japan, if any country is in economic decline, then the money and the resources will go to the men's team, unfortunately. And then the women's will kind of decline a little bit further until the economic situation improves. Yeah. So
Yep. Yep.
they, in the FIFA world, they were third in 2011 in the
Hmm.
FIFA World assignments. They were
Hmm.
defeated in the by the USA in the World Cup 2011. They defeated the USA
Hmm.
in the World Cup in 2011. They got silver in
Yes.
2012 Olympics. Um,
Hmm.
2015 World Cup they won. They've just had really good, and recently they've won the Asia Cup, haven't they, against Australia?
Yes. They have. Yep. They sure did.
Now, what makes them very, very successful? When I was researching this, what is interesting about this, Dan, is that I came away thinking, oh my gosh, this is like teaching pedagogy in the way that
Mm.
they approach the development of the Japanese players. And I mean both men and women. They have exactly the
Yes.
same blueprint print. So the ages are
Hmm.
broken down and they start at grassroots and school systems, and they make those into programs at school level. So at 8 to 9,
Hmm.
I'll just give you a pen picture here. Ages 8 to 9, that's what they call the Enlightenment period. So it's about the pure joy and the pure joy and enjoyment of the game. They focus on muscle memory and accuracy And then 10 to
Wow.
15, they develop the basic techniques and tactics, learning, transitioning. And then it's 16 to 17, they'll go into the practical application of the learning that's gone before. Ages 18 to 21,
Hmm.
that's the maturity period. And at 21 and above is the completion period. And that's the national team. But they have a
Wow.
very clear structure. We've been talking about structures. They have
Hmm.
a very, very clear structure. And what is
Hmm.
paramount to this is the grassroots. That is their long-term strategy. So they look at it, and that makes sense to me, is that they start with grassroots. They look at the long-term issues and the long-term strategy starting at grassroots, which to me, they
Hmm.
have to have a crop to yield from. Of course they do. That makes sense. Does
Of
that not?
course.
Yeah. I mean, you don't
It
start.
absolutely, yeah, it does.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you don't start at age 15. If you're talking about how youngsters, and I'm talking very young, and I've just given you an overview of the ages, um, you're
Hmm.
talking very young, and they say they go for very young children because they're sponges.
Yes.
But they're
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
they they put the player first. So every one of those individual players, they have like their own assessment and their own needs, their own individual players
Yeah.
program, if you like.
Hmm.
So, I mean, as they get older, then they start to get those barriers in place. So there are times
Yes.
within a child's development where they are ripe to learn, and there are times when they are not. So they'll go and they'll treat every single player as individuals, and they will see them not as a linear progression, but as a roller coaster. Life is a roller coaster, and so is your development and your progression. So that's how they treat them.
Absolutely.
And then obviously
Hmm.
their learnings is fed into the coaching development. So the coaches will take those um, individual learnings, if you like, of each of them. And their mantle is player first. That's player first, player first. Now, if you think about Japan, what players come to mind?
Oh my goodness, what doesn't come to mind? Yui Hasegawa, if I'm looking at the NWSL, Manaka, Riko Ueki. I mean, there's so many players across in a lot of leagues, and Maika Hamano. Oh my goodness, Fuka Nagano, everyone, all of them come to mind, and I can name a handful of them for the sole reason that they're so fun to watch.
Absolutely. Well, would you believe of Japan's 26 squad, 22 of them
Hmm.
play either in the USA, so the NWSL, or
Hmm.
Europe, like the WSL. I mean, immediately I think of Hasegawa
Yes.
and Fujino. And I
Hmm.
mean, you only
I can
have
believe
to
it.
look at them. I mean, they are described, particularly Hasegawa, they are described as the brains of the team. They have
Yes.
intelligence, football intelligence. They can read the game. They can read several passes in advance. And there is an emphasis on passing and using the fast pace of the ball. So using the natural fast pace of the ball, they use that in their passing, because what they've had to do is compensate for the fact they have much smaller physicality, but they have
Yes.
learned to dart in and out of those bigger players.
Hmm.
And those teams or clubs that have the more stringent structures, if you like, more rigid structures, they are able to take them out of their structure and just make them shapeless.
Yes.
And then they can score their goals
Yes.
accordingly, or pass very quickly up through the pitch. So it is a lot about intelligence. It is a lot about malleability in terms of fitting into different manager approaches. So, instance, Fujino
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
Yui, they have fit
Hmm.
perfectly into Lieglert's plan because of their malleability.
Yes.
But you can also see that
Hmm.
in return, he has trusted their creativity and their ability to play
Correct.
the game. So it's a great fit, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah, it is. And if I think of Japan, the way and everything you're telling us about how they develop these players and the emphasis on their intelligence, but also their technical skills. They're so technical, so clean when they're on the
Yeah.
ball. I think of if you go back to the Women's World Cup in 2023, the only loss Spain had was from Japan. And
Yes,
it's
4
so
nil.
interesting to see probably two of the most technical teams in the world, I would think, Japan and Spain, those two contrasting styles. They're
Mm,
not they're not as different as we would probably think, but putting them together, it was such a fascinating game to watch because you see these two players, and I think Spain is probably a good example of the very specific development for men and for women or for boys and girls coming up. It's very, very similar to Japan in terms of technical development. And just to see that, how Japan has developed those players and to see that out in full force against a team that could match them technically completely and how
mm.
they were able to essentially dismantle that team for nothing. I mean, it's not surprising when you tell us everything of how it came to be this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you know, I often did wonder, just because they beat Spain 4 nil, didn't they, in the 23 World Cup?
Mhm, mhm.
And how quickly people forget things like that, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? If I go back to
Yeah.
the, the pounding that the Lionesses
Yeah.
have just received, these things are easily forgotten, aren't they?
Mhm. For
Because
sure.
then Spain went
They
on to win the
certainly
World
are.
Cup. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And if you get
Yeah,
the outcome, then your supporters and fans are happy. Thank you very much.
of
It
course.
doesn't matter how you got there. So I've often wondered,
Absolutely.
Dan, when I've been on YouTube, there is such
Mhm,
a large cohort of Japanese fans, especially around
yes.
City. There's a big cohort of fans supporting City, I can tell you. And I've often wondered why
Mhm,
that is. And it's because of their Women's Empowerment League. So it's all about, as I said, empowering the women, cutting for those
mhm,
cultural issues, overturning tradition and the thoughts about the women's game and about women in general. So, and that they've been established since 1966, the Japan Football Association,
mhm.
and so is the
Yeah.
club, the team. So they've been around a very, very long time, enough to be in people's
Yes.
psyche, especially the women. So it's that, the empowerment
Mhm,
of women, and obviously that you've got Hasegawa and Fujina there as well. So yeah, there is a big
mhm.
cohort in this country of Japan fans.
I also think for Manchester City specifically, if you just look at traditionally, and I think it's evolved a little bit under Yeglerts, but if you just look at even like Manchester City as a whole, as a football club, because you will see similarities to how even the men play to the women play. They have a very specific structure and
Mm,
playing system that they typically stick to. Again, is very possession heavy. It is very tactically, a lot of tactical intelligence. And again, Jeglerts has evolved this team a little bit, and I think he had to, but it's a very specific style. I think that lends itself to Japanese players because they
yeah,
probably find some familiarity in that style as well. So it's not surprising that there's a lot of fans.
yeah. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. I find it brilliant. That's what triggered my interest to research a little bit more into the Japan Football Association.
Mhm, for sure. Absolutely. It makes sense. It's a very similar vibe going on there for sure. Um, do you want me to hit one of them on my list, Bev?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So Bev gave us a wonderful breakdown of Japan, and Japan have been such a successful team. And I think with the team that they have and how many youngsters are on that, I think they're going to be talked about for years to come. So that's definitely one to keep watch on. And if you have not watched Japan play, I highly recommend. It is so fun, and they are incredible to watch. They make me smile when they play all the time. I'm going to deviate to this side of the pond, specifically because I did have a couple of people who asked me to speak specifically about my federation. And this is
Okay.
going to be a very, very different breakdown because it is definitely not as positive as the lovely Japanese for a variety of different reasons. Oh boy. Okay. So Canada's federation is called Canada Soccer, for those who are not aware. It does not have football in the name. Obviously, we use more of the soccer term here. And this has been a federation that has been plagued by issues. And I want to be really clear, the women have suffered a little bit more, but the federation as a whole has been poorly run. There have been times where men's teams and even their youth teams or whatever have maybe not been able to hold as many camps per year and that sort of thing because funding and issues with funding have always been a problem. It has been poorly run from the people at the top of it, so there's been a lot of corruption at the top of it. So obviously, when you have all these bad faith characters and money and people who just don't care too much to do a good job of what they're doing, things are going to suffer, and unfortunately, women suffer even more in the process. But it has been a overall poorly run organization for many, many, many years. Just need to put that out there. So if you
Okay.
look up Canada Soccer, the biggest themes that you will come up with is equality, funding, and governance, as I just said. So those are the top three things. You can put that into your AI generator, whoever wants to look it up. Those are the things that are going to come up. Now, our conflicts here, specifically on the women's side, have consistently been with equal pay. And again, when we say equal pay, we do not mean pay us the same amount of money. It is the same amount of resources as well as payment. There have been issues with treatment because of this. And the biggest problem is transparency. So the Federation has never been very transparent in the way that things are run. And that has affected a lot of development as well. So if you go back to our episode on structures, this part of the world operates a little differently in structures because we do not have those historical ones in place as Bev mentioned. If you look at European structures and those sorts of things, it's run a little bit differently. So youth programs are different. We have different provinces here. They're run so differently. It is a completely different version. So please go back to that episode and definitely listen to it. So equal pay and treatment have been the two biggest things. And the biggest job action I would say that came out of this is after the Olympics. So we took home a gold medal in the 2021 Olympics. And after that, it was widely reported that for the longest time, players were not compensated appropriately for that. And they were still waiting for a lot of compensation. Now, again, as I mentioned, this is a federation-wide issue, but of course, women always draw the short end of it. Even if it's pretty short, they draw the even shorter end of the
Yeah.
situation. So there was big job action that came down in 2024. Most notably, the players, again, 3 years later, or 2 years later, were still waiting for their compensation, some of their compensation. Funding had also been cut, so national team camps were scaled back. And they decided that they were going to not participate in the She Believes tournament in 2024. And I want to stress that this has been a constant issue from years and years ago. The only difference is we started to hear more about it in 2024 because when you start becoming a little bit more popular, a little bit more successful, more eyes, as you know, Bev, will float onto
Yeah.
your situation or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
10, 12 years ago, nobody really said anything because, to be honest, most people probably did not care. So they threatened this job action this was in 2023, not 2024. They were told by their federation if they did not play, that there would be significant consequences. So you have to remember these are unionized players as well. So you can just see the level of power and governance that's going on there. They did
Yeah.
eventually play in the She Believes Cup under protest, but it was not a happy tournament. They thankfully in the She Believes Cup had the United States as an opponent, and the U.S. of course has always been a little bit at the foreground of equal treatment and so forth. So the U.S. were very, very vocal of their support for our national team. It's probably the only time that we will ever get along because we do not like each other in terms of the actual football. So just giving
Mhm.
you that amount for that.
Yeah.
But definitely they absolutely had our backs. And the broader kind of governance have always been looked at. Um, Again, it's been always been really, really shady. Financial management, um, different agreements. So it's taken very, very long time to get agreements in place. And again, this is across the board because they do sign agreements. The men, the women, they sign them. Allocation of resources as well. Again, it's been poorly resourced. And I think the biggest issue that has come to light from the Federation, and this goes back again to governance, is 2024 Paris Olympics, the drones,
Yeah.
goddamn drones, excuse my language. Yeah. And what emerged from that was a deep-rooted toxic culture that had been going on for years and years and years. I want to be really clear. I'm not excusing the behaviors of then coach Bev Priestman. Apologies, she shares your name. I'm not excusing her behavior. However, she was a piece of a very rotten tree. It
Mm.
stretched before her, and it was things that were passed down and traditions. And I know it sounds really silly to say, but traditions that came from, again, poor governance, poor mismanagement, corrupted people that have no business running a federation. However, what came out of that and what usually happens when these situations come to light is that it shone a massive light on how things were being run, and it allowed people to uh, be fired and lose their jobs. And there are thankfully now a lot better people in positions, including the CEO, Kevin Blue, who, by the way, when that scandal erupted in 2024, he was only a month into the job. So he was one of the people who had been replaced because there was other things that had transpired. And he seems to be not a rotten apple, thankfully, and has done significantly great things. Funding remains a problem. I will say that. Our national team coaches on both ends, their salaries, for example, are funded not directly by the federation. It's partially from the federation, partially from other initiatives. So that should tell you in terms of money what that looks like and how there is a resistance to properly funding Canada soccer. And unfortunately, it has hindered the development of the national team. It has hindered the development of the youth teams as well. But when we look at the successes that have come, a gold medal faring pretty well in terms of defensive development, always been a really defensively minded team. Despite all of these issues, the team has not performed as poorly as you would expect from a crappy federation. So there are some bright spots, but unfortunately, this highlight of this federation is mostly negative because it has mostly been a negative on the development. And when you look at, for example, if I look at the FA in England, some things I'm sure it has not always been perfect, and I know that for sure, but it is run so differently, and you can clearly see when you start to govern something appropriately versus inappropriately what results that they do yield. So I do apologize for
Absolutely.
taking this into a negative side of the conversation, but it needs to be highlighted because it's never going to change, formally change everything unless we start to shine even more lights. Again, it is changing a little bit slowly, and we do have better people in place, but there was so much of a toxic culture and mismanagement of governance for years upon years upon years that it still is. We're still feeling the results of that for sure.
Well, can you remember when we were talking about controversies and characters? Was that last week?
Yes,
I think it was, yes.
yes, ma'am.
And I said,
Mhm.
and I was talking about
Mhm.
the ant and the biro. The ant and the
Mhm.
biro. Now that, when you talk about Bev Priestman, that's exactly what I'm
Mhm.
referring to. She,
Yes.
as a result, those behaviors, because in a toxic culture, you are trapped
Mhm.
because that is the
Yes.
expectation for you to do the same. And where do you go with that if,
Mhm.
like women's football, is not at a certain level or at a certain stage? Because, as you said, when you introduced Canada to talk about, nobody
Mhm.
cared 12 years ago, did they? It was all hidden.
Mhm. It's true.
So that,
It is true. And
yeah,
unfortunately, like you said, where do you go if the people above you are in the same toxic space? There's nowhere to
yeah.
go,
No, there isn't because they're at
right?
the roof, aren't they?
Hmm.
They're at the roof.
Yep, they really are. They really are. They really are. And unfortunately, Beth Priestman was the one who was hung out to dry for this. And again, I'm not excusing her behavior. The punishment was what, she was banned for a year, whatever it might be. Those all completely agree with that. But it was a lot larger than just that one person. And we know
Yes.
about it now, and like I said, hopefully, and it seems that the right people are making better decisions now, and that is great. But it is quite a dark stain on the federation, and again, those behaviors the results are still being felt, and I think it's going to be a little while before we fully rid ourselves of them. But that is this lovely part of the world. Bev, I hope you have something a little bit better for us, maybe on the next one.
I think, to be honest with you, the countries, federations, and associations that we're speaking about just shows,
Mhm.
and we're talking about on a world level now, how
Mhm.
uneven the women's game is in terms of federations and structures and infrastructures and allocation of resource, and we can keep going on. It is uneven terrain. I've just said that with Japan. You've
Mhm.
said something different with Canada. Can I just go back to Japan? And I want just to finish off with Niels
Yes.
Nielsen. We were talking about, we've mentioned Niels Nielsen, it wasn't on air. And the reason why Japan Federation got rid of him, or association got rid of him, was that they felt he was not ambitious enough. He was lacking in passion, and that he was too soft
Wow.
in his approach. And they wanted a Japan coach, because obviously it would reflect the template that Japan have in terms of the development and application of the women's game. So they really are going for
Mhm.
it. They are very, very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Ambitious.
Ambitious. That's the word I'm looking for. So there you have Japan is an ambitious football association, and Canada that has just had a hodgepodge past, hasn't it? A very checkered past.
It absolutely. Oh, it absolutely has,
Which
unfortunately.
which leads me nicely into the next country.
Mhm.
Now, I think I've looked at this one because of the exceptional and unusual situation in which this country finds itself, and that's Ukraine.
Mhm.
And obviously, England
Mm.
will be no, they're not playing Ukraine tomorrow, they're playing Iceland, but they have got Ukraine within their group, haven't they?
Well, they're no, they're playing Ukraine tomorrow.
I thought they were playing Iceland.
I just looked. No, they're playing Ukraine because Spain is playing Iceland tomorrow. So it has
Oh,
to be the
okay then.
opposite.
Okay.
Just look
Oh,
it up.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
it is.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
we're about to have a war
Yeah.
here. Excuse me, me and Dan are just going to have a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Ukraine. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're playing Ukraine tomorrow. My mistake. And I thought, right, I've got
Mhm.
to drag that one in because it is exceptional, unusual. And with all these
Yes.
federations, and why we have said we wanted to have this podcast, with all those intersecting aspects of economy, politics,
Yep.
culture, all of those
Mhm.
sociology, all of those things, and history, all of those things are interrelating into the women's game, and you can see it when you speak at this level of federation and football association level.
Mhm.
Ukraine, now I have to say, prior to the troubles that started in 2022 with the Russian invasion,
Mhm.
um, that Ukraine women's football team were on the receiving end of sexism, like a lot of other countries, including
Mhm.
this one. And
Yep.
misogyny, sexism, thinking in traditional ways and old templates, and those old templates being, continued and being used on every
Mhm.
level. And
Mhm.
again, the money was money, if the country was struggling economically, then the money was transferred to the men's team and it was depleted in terms of the women's. Now, Girls Soccer Network did a feature on this um, during the pandemic, and it was saying about the massive numbers. In the pandemic, there was 105,505 people that died in Ukraine on top of the Russian invasion, and nearly 5 million people were infected. Their infrastructure was almost destroyed. That's housing,
Yeah.
hospitals, schools, leisure, pleasure, including grounds, football grounds and stadiums, etc. Um, there was 800 refugees. Um, Thousands were, out into the streets. They'd lost their home. Many women actually joined the army in Ukraine and are fighting for their country. And you wonder, is this why now Ukraine and their football association have put together a project called Target? And on every
Mhm.
level, starting at school level with very, very young children, they're overturning that sexist and misogynist attitude that they are using
Yes.
Disney characters and Disney films in a playful way, looking at interactions between men and women and, girls and boys, um, and trying to get them to challenge, but in an appropriate way for those youngsters. That actually
Mhm.
women play football too, and they can play football and they can occupy that space. So they are putting an
Yes.
awful lot into their programs. They really, really are. Um, and they are doing well because, if anything, Ukraine have gone up the ranks. They've gone up from 35 to 34 in FIFA's rankings, which I think is absolutely commendable. What do you think,
Mhm.
Dan?
Oh, completely. Yeah, that's incredible. And I think it's interesting when you start to look at, again, challenging the broader ideals of women and what or
Mm,
how we view women and how that can be, in some ways drifted down into sport because as we said, sport and everything has always been political. It has always been something that has stood for larger than what it actually is. And to
mm,
know that these things are being challenged, but they're also being challenged, but also taught in ways that are appropriate, as you said. It's really not that hard to draw some similar lines between, oh, this is getting better because we're seeing things a lot differently up here. It's
mm,
kind of like that broader umbrella and it's trickling down into other parts of their society for sure.
mm. Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, their world ranking in terms of human rights and equality is
Mhm.
61.4, and that's
Right.
20th among EU countries and improving all the time. And, the question is this because of the war and that the women have joined the men in terms of fighting? When we looked at the First World War, Dan, we explored that, and it is said that, the women were left behind. But on this occasion, they
Mhm.
have joined the men, and that's a cultural shift.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, no, for sure. And that's something you don't see every day, right? And I think that speaks to, I think, probably the times that we're in and the situation that's occurring, and obviously a larger cultural identity and ties to your country. But um, it is something that I think we will continue to speak about because I mean, unfortunately, I do not foresee Ukraine coming away with a result tomorrow, but
No.
there is a broader conversation in what it means for, and even right now, like you figure, okay, this country is still involved in this conflict or at war, to even be able to go out on the stage and perform
Yes.
under, where your family is, and granted, I know the whole country, and it's in different ways depending on where you are. It might be more advanced than other places, and it's a very nuanced conversation for Ukraine. But the fact that they're even able to participate in this Nations League and UEFA qualifiers for the World Cup when there's so much else going on should just show you the power of what sport can do for
Yes.
people. Um,
Yes.
because I mean, can you imagine next year Ukraine goes to the World Cup and they're still involved in this conflict? That is a story, and I don't mean to sound sensationalized. That's not what I'm trying to do. But that is a story that writes itself. How
Yeah,
these women were able to get there despite all of this?
absolutely, Dan. And actually, you've taken the words right out of my mouth because they say why it's improving and why they are tackling cultural aspects such as, very traditional views of women and what they can and cannot do and the spaces that they can and cannot occupy, etc., is because of the feel good
Mhm.
factor that, football is giving the country. That it's a
Something. Yeah.
distraction from um, the COVID and what it did to the country. And on top of that, immediately on top of that was the Russian invasion. It gives them identity.
Exactly.
We've spoken in our first podcast about football and affiliation and support of a
Mhm.
club is about identity and how it's passed down the generations. So I think even the women's team has really
Mhm.
helped in shaping Ukraine's modern identity and that women are playing a
Mhm.
key part in the discourse.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you. And that's again, this is one that probably gonna want to keep an eye on. And I do truly think that Ukraine is one that clearly wants to continue to invest in the ways that
Yeah.
they can. Obviously, I know things are very difficult in the country, but it sounds like they are way more open to investing and building that program. And you hope that we get to a point in the world where they do not have to deal with this nonsense in their country anymore, and they can
Mm,
get back to doing things that feel good. And football and sport makes everyone feel good. So
mm.
I think it's Ukraine's going to be one to watch. I'm gonna consider them a future dark horse. I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna put a bold prediction out there.
Well,
Future dark
you've
horse.
got you've got to say something about their resolve if they are able to
Hmm.
navigate these exceptional and unusual situations, haven't you? You know, you're going to take
Completely.
that resolve and build on it. Maybe 10 years, even less, that they may
Hmm.
be a force to be reckoned with.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. We're gonna mark them as a future one to watch, and just one to pay attention to because these are very difficult and trying circumstances to navigate. All of the issues that already come along with women's football sometimes, and then add on top of that there's countrywide conflict that's out of their control. So definitely one to watch. I do appreciate you bringing that one forward, Bev. It was not one that I had would have thought about honestly, and I'm really glad that we were able to talk through Ukraine and talk through Japan, two very obviously contrasting situations, and what they kind of mean. Because when I was researching, I think I told you this, there's a quite a few countries that have had issues with their federations, and there's a lot of patterns, I guess we could say, that go along with those patterns. But I think ones that stood out as ones that are have been traditionally fairly well. When I say fairly well, I mean not that they're not without issues, but I think Japan, the United States, and more recently the FA in England are ones that kind of stand out as a quite better run and governed. Again,
Mm,
not without issues. The U.S. had an equal pay thing. I know the Lionesses had fought with the Federation a little bit for their agreement and their payment and that sort of thing at one point. So those ones, but they definitely stand out as more leaders in terms of how to govern an organization or a federation or association, whatever you want to call them. I know they're called
mm,
differently in different places. So those
mm,
ones stand out. But I really wanted to quickly go through a couple of other ones. I'm not going to expand on them. I'm just going to go through ones that came up as issue points, and I'm going to share with you, or actually, I'm going to let you tell me what you think some of the broader patterns are. So Spain, Nigeria, Canada, we touched on, Australia, Denmark, Norway, Jamaica, South Africa, Argentina, New Zealand, South Korea, and was there one more? Yeah, and South Korea, and I think France, if I mentioned that one or not. What do you think are some of the biggest patterns that you would see in all of these?
Well, it's got to be misogyny, surely, and sexism and tradition being just, yeah,
Yeah,
duplicated throughout. I would have thought so. And
yeah,
yeah, I should imagine there's strong resistance to a space that's always traditionally been occupied by men, footballers. Am I right or am I
yeah.
right?
Nope, you're right. You are right, 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 and right. The traditional themes, sexism and misogyny is the underlying theme, and then they're just, again, it's like that umbrella, and then the umbrella that comes down because of that, there's issues with governance, there's issues with payments, there's issues with funding, proper treatment, um, even things like welfare, player welfare. In some places, Nigeria had a massive issue with player welfare because they were playing on unsupported pitches, they were playing in bad conditions. Lack of and player welfare goes to lack of resources, not appropriate staff members. Spain had that issue as well. And I think what was interesting is all of these things, while some of them have their decent points, there was also a lot of issues. And unfortunately, when we talk about some of these big powerhouses in football, a lot of people don't realize that it took a long time to get there. It took a long time
Mm,
for the US to become what they were because they did have issues. It's taken time for England to get where they are because they've had issues. It's taken Spain quite a battle to get there. And these are ones that we consistently hear about. And because we don't maybe pay as much attention to certain Asian countries or African countries or Caribbean countries, that there are major issues that continue to be out there. And as you mentioned before, it speaks to the playing field is not very equal at all. Um, Anywhere, really. There's only a few that are kind of leading the way, and that is an anomaly in and of itself versus the kind of the exception. It's more the exception, excuse me, versus the rule. And the rule, unfortunately, is that there are still massive issues across the board. And we hope that we can get more eyes on some ones that are not as well reported on, for sure.
Do you know what? I mean, I almost feel, based on what we've been discussing, I almost think that we need to
Mhm.
have one on tradition and modernity.
Mm, I
Yeah,
think so.
and yeah,
Yeah.
and in the future, because I almost
Hmm.
feel that I want to wipe the slate clean. If we had a magic wand, wipe the slate
Hmm.
clean in terms of the women's game and start again, how would
Hmm.
that look like? We could get we could get rid of all the men's stuff in that they're under the, like tenants in the
Hmm.
men's
Yeah.
clubs, they're like tenants, aren't they,
Hmm.
almost paying rent. Um, if we could get rid of all
Yeah.
of those things and that they don't have the correct infrastructure, that we have disparity at the top with clubs like Arsenal and Chelsea and those at the very bottom at grassroots level. If we could start again, what that might look like in terms of a blank canvas, Dan. You know what I mean? Because you would take it away. It
Yeah.
would be out of your memory, wouldn't it? It would be taken out of your memory
Hmm.
banks and you could reprogram.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that would be a fantastic idea, actually, because that would be an interesting way to look at it and how we would change the game if it was up to us, basically, right?
Yep. Yeah, World Sevens every day.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wish. You know what? I wish it was fun every year, at least for sure. We're definitely here for the World Sevens. We had a ball watching that.
Yep.
Bev, thank you so much for highlighting those federations, and I really appreciated our chat today. I know, guys, there's so many other ones we could have absolutely spoken about, and you know what? We could have future episodes where we dive a little bit deeper into some of them because there's some great things and some, again, as I mentioned, not so great things, and just kind of speaks again to the disparity on a international level when it comes to the football playing field. And we are consistently going to be highlighting these things because we want to continue the conversation. Bev,
And
what are we going to chat about next episode?
well, I do want to say, I mean, I'm a little bit disappointed that we've had nobody putting their comments under either
I know.
YouTube or come on, guys, come on, come on, come on. We need some comments. We need
Yes.
engagement. We need discussion. That's the whole purpose
Hmm.
of our podcast, is about blasting through these very difficult topics. We think that we're quite unique. Sorry, as women, we do believe that, don't we, Dan? We are going to spout our
100%.
worth. We are going to spout our worth and saying that we're coming in from quite an interesting and unique angle at this. Yes, I am a feminist.
Absolutely.
Fully paid up one. And, as a woman, had to over many more, well, a few more generations than Dan, have been hanging out in the
Hmm.
rain a little bit longer. So, I've seen different. Yeah, I got my hair. I have
Yeah,
seen
seen a few.
different
Seen a few.
things. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
seen different things over the the decades. But it's got to be about your daughters and your sons as well, because we need your sons and your daughters. Your sons working with your daughters who might be interested in playing football in the future. Because without men's
Yeah.
support, we won't get there.
Absolutely. We agree completely. I agree completely with Bev. Of course, please continue to listen in, and we would really, 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 with cherries on top, appreciate some commentary. Honestly, if you agree with us, just tell us, like, hey, I disagree with you wholeheartedly. Please tell us why. And if you agree with us, you know what? We appreciate the comments and we appreciate the positivity as well, but definitely does not need to be all positive. So go for it. Tell us you disagree and tell us why. We would love to hear it because we'd love to have some interesting debates. And I think if we look at, you know what, Bev, I actually have an idea. Since we are going through World Cup qualification for UEFA right now, and South American teams are going through that as well, how about we look at what that looks like for every kind of continent next week? And I actually did have one suggestion, and this came to me as a private suggestion, so I'm just going to share it. I'm not going to share who asked, but as we are in June, and June is Pride Month in a lot of places, someone did ask if we could speak a little bit about queer culture in women's football because it does seem to be very dominant. I was wondering if you're open to speaking about that because I think it'd be an interesting conversation to have during this month of celebration as well.
Yes, I think that's absolutely fine. Yeah. Yes, I
But
think so
yeah,
because women's football has a strong cohort of LGBTQ plus queer community.
mhm,
Yes, am I right in saying that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. You are
Okay.
absolutely right about that. So I think we can break that episode down next week, kind of talk about both things. And there's quite a bit of transfer stuff heating up. So I think maybe we can do a recap next week, as I'm sure there's going to be more developments in the days that come on
Yeah,
everything that's going on, because it never seems to stop.
yeah, maybe we can have those three topics have around about an equal amount of time. So the transfers, what's
Sure.
going on with the qualifiers, and then looking at the queer community as reflecting women's football. How's that? So about of equal measures?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can I
Sounds good
just
to
say,
me. Yes.
shall I, can I
Mhm.
just, we'll have to work this out once we come off air, Dan, but in the future, we've got somebody, a guy, who is Shadow Football Podcast, who has agreed to come and speak with us from Chinese
Yay.
Taipei.
Mhm.
He absolutely amazing in terms of knowledge, in terms of strategy and tactics with the women's game. He really knows his stuff. He is incredibly interesting. So we'll get that sorted and you'll hear from him
Yes.
in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that, and I know our listeners will look forward to that as well. Bev, thank you for spending your couple of hours with me. We really appreciate the conversation today. Oh, I really appreciate the conversation today.
Yes, so do I.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, definitely. Thank you all, everyone. This will be coming out imminently, so if you are listening in first thing on Tuesday, June 9th, you will hear this, and we'll see you next week. See you later.
Bye bye. Have fun.